Well, for me, what was really refreshing about Laura, so often when you see women in 1950s movies, you think of the sort of 50s housewife, you know, and I think Laura is, you know, so much more pioneering than that. You know, she grew up in the Harlem jazz clubs, but she also is a trained lawyer. You know, she's straddling these two different worlds, and as Edward said, you know, she's sort of very much underestimated, and I found that really fascinating. And the period, I mean, and Edward's script was just so rich, and they, you know, every character as it emerges, you know, everybody has their entrance, and then there's just more and more layers to each person as you meet them, and I really appreciated that, and I love the noir genre as well. So it was a really great challenge, and to work with these incredible actors.
Craft the performance. You know, I just thought about playing the scenes. My character has a responsibility, and he's got all of this secret information to impart to him to push the story along. And that text is very rich, and it's very complicated. So the thing that I was always concerned with was being clear about it, conveying it, but also doing the action required to push things along. I like the character very much because who he is initially, who you think he is very different than what is presented later, and what his relationship is to these other parts of the story. So to craft a performance, that's tough to say. I just had to, you know, deliver a kind of urgency and a kind of stake, and I really cued off Edward's character, you know, take what he could receive sort of and give it to him.
I thought of Willem as the Obi-Wan Kenobi of mid-century New York urban policy. He's the Jedi Knight in rags, who, and if there's anybody who I felt could sort of seem a little crazy, but then actually be a really good person, it was Willem.
What is he trying to say?
Sounds okay to me.
What was it like on set? It's got this incredible cast of characters. You're acting and directing at the same time. How does that even work when you've got these incredible performers? You've got Alec Baldwin there on many days as well, and you're also kind of running, I would imagine, back and forth between directing and being in the scene.
I'm getting anxious again just listening to you describe it back to me. It's like just the memory of it.
I don't recommend it.
Is turning me into a pretzel again. It's let me put it this way. Whatever the necessity, whatever drove me to feel that it was something I wanted to do, I felt very anxious about what it would do to my fellow actors and their experience, because we like to have concentration together. We like to, even within all the artifice of making films, I think one of the things actors often do for each other as the last resort, because is create a bubble together within all this artifice, all this technical stuff that's going on that makes up the day. Actors help each other to create an illusion together. And when one of you is breaking out of that with a constancy, it's a lot to ask. And I think my hedge against it was really to go to seek out the actors that, to me, I knew were trade craft professionals. And by that I mean really like theater trained people that I knew didn't have what I would call an emotional neediness from a director. Could bring more to me than I could ever really like guide them into. And my cast in this really was my secret weapon in terms of being able to achieve the sort of schizophrenic experience of being both in and outside the playing of it.
And for you, Gugu and Willem, Willem, what was it like working with him as both actor and director? Was that complicated? You can leave the stage or close your ears right now.
You know, it was amazing. I mean, you know, sometimes I would just be in complete awe of all of the takes that I would have to spin, all of the different hats he was wearing, from, you know, maybe adjusting the script slightly, or to being in the scene, to watching something on the monitor, to driving a car, to, you know, the reams of dialogue that we had, and it was so incredibly impressive. But it was also, it made for quite an intimate process, you know, because your director's right there, you know, so it's very quick to receive the notes, to make adjustments, to, you know, and it's like you're all in it together. I don't know, it just felt very intimate way to work.
Intimate and fluid, and also sometimes I got the feeling he was everywhere. So he has, no, really, it was crazy. He had so many tasks that I think that created no room for, you know, self-consciousness or overthinking. He was very well prepared because he'd been living with this material for a long time. He really felt the character so deeply, he didn't really have to think about that. So it's almost like he's there as the God, you know, creating the world, and he's in it. So there's no stepping out and kind of evaluating. There was a fluidity, as I say, and urgency that was very cool. And it never, you know, it was like there wasn't that delay of, ooh, how did we do? Let's get feedback from the director, or, ooh, let's check playback. It was very direct. It was much closer to some sort of theater experience. You hop on that train, you hang onto your hat, and, you know, it's like you feel everything. It felt a little bit like that. It was quite seamless.
Just watching you do that reminded me of what you said the other day about it, like being in a boxing ring, you know, and you've got your boxing coach like whispering notes in your ear, and they're in the ring with you, you know, and I thought that was a really good way to describe it.
Or if we're going to go crazy with sports analogies, I thought, you know, it's the difference between, you know, plays being called in from the sidelines, from the coach into the quarterback's ear, or the quarterback assessing the field and, you know, calling the plays himself. I don't know how you feel about sports analogies, but
in New York, when you're on the streets in New York and someone's running around shouting strange things and talking to themselves, nobody even glances at you. It's like it doesn't cause a stir in the slightest. So
I wanted to ask you,
it's pretty low profile.
I wanted to ask you about that part of the performance as well, the Tourette syndrome and the compulsive behavior as well, which requires a certain really disciplined physicality to that part of the performance. How did you develop that? What kind of research did you do to create that part of the movie?
There's lots of good documentation there are good documentaries about people with Tourette syndrome. There's some very, very warm and deep feeling ones. There's Oliver Sacks's great writing on it, and I had met people organically in the course of my life, and then specifically sought out some. The thing that I think is fascinating and beautiful in many ways about Tourette syndrome is that it's a wildly creative condition. As you can see, it expresses itself in people in a very individualistic way. Nobody manifests it in exactly the same way, and the expressions and fixations physically and vocally, the wordplay, the degrees of severity is extremely individualistic, and so there was a lot of liberation for creativity within it, and that made me. Of course, you feel a pretty profound obligation to be truthful within it, and yet it wasn't the kind of thing that you have an anxiety about getting wrong because you've selected, you know, an incorrect manifestation. Because it really to say that there's a spectrum is an understatement.
I love the word "if." That was that kind of recurring gesture that he had. Anything you want to tell us about that? Is there a meaning to that?
I think there's Willem's character says that if is a wonderful existential question, and I leave it at that. I thought it stood in for a lot of things. Candidly, that was something that when I was in college, there was a taxi driver I used to get really regularly. It's not in the book, that particular the tip of that word isn't in the book. But I had a taxi driver that I used to ride with a lot, going to and from the college train station, and he had Tourette's syndrome, and that was his word. It took me dozens of rides to realize what was going on, but it always stuck with me. It made me smile, and it stayed in my brain when we got into this. Yeah.
That's great.